What does Obama mean, get out and vote? Was he not president for 8 years? Was not Biden vice president for 8 years? And you know, it's interesting to me, Larry, when you really look at what Donald Trump has done, he has had a concentrated interest in the black community, and he's done something specifically he feels that would help the black community, whether it's economic, whether it's criminal justice reform, whatever it is. He gets absolutely no credit for that, whereas Obama is treated like, wow, look at all these wonderful things he did in the black community. As best as I can tell, he didn't do anything significant in the black community.
Not only did he not do anything significant, he made things worse. You look at the poverty rate, it actually went up under Barack Obama. Look, this is a guy who said the Cambridge police acted stupidly when he first became president, when the Cambridge police acted perfectly fine. This is a guy who said when he gave an address before the United Nations, Mark, we've got a place called Ferguson where we have our own problems. We find out, oops, Michael Brown did not say don't shoot. His hands were not up, and the officer was completely exonerated. The president also said if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, whatever the hell that means. And during Ferguson, AG Eric Holder flies into Ferguson and says publicly, I'm here not just as AG, I'm also here as a black man. I don't know what that means. If I'm Officer Darren Wilson, that didn't make me feel particularly good. So in my opinion, Obama has made things worse, has given black people the impression that the police are out to get them. And if you look at the polls, race relations fell precipitously in the second half of Obama's second term and have improved during the 3 years that President Trump has been in office. The other thing that Obama did that hurt the black community is when he was a private lawyer, Mark, he filed a class action lawsuit against Citigroup, arguing that the would-be black borrowers were not getting loans because they were black. It's complete BS. But lawsuits like that pressured the federal government into changing lending criteria, forcing banks to basically lend money to anybody who could fog up a mirror. That is the basis for the housing crisis in 2007, 2008. And when Obama was president, from 2010 to 2013, Mark, black net worth fell about 30%. Largely because a bunch of black people had homes that, but for the lowering of standards, they never would have had. And they lost the homes, lost the equity, lost everything. All of this having to do with people like Barack Obama, who as a citizen lawyer argued that banks were shafting black people when in fact they were not. So the recession, in my opinion, could be laid at the feet of people like Barack Obama. And this anger at the police can also be laid at the feet by people like Barack Obama and his AG, who constantly put out anti-cop rhetoric.
You know, I looked at some of these statistics on crime via Conservative Review and Daniel Horowitz, who really is quite the scholar, and he dug into some of the numbers provided on the database of the Washington Post, of all places. And he looked at 2018, and he found in 2018 there were 17 instances nationwide of African Americans unarmed being shot by police officers. And he said if we take those instances and assume in every case that the police officer was wrong, this is not systemic racism. And he said, in fact, when you look at the 2018 data, of these over 7,400 or so black individuals who were killed, they were killed 90% black on black crime, on black crime. And he pointed out, he said, the failure, the abject failure of the media and civil rights leaders and so forth to condemn this, which is really what happens. When we look at the numbers in Chicago we talk about every weekend and so forth, those aren't cop killings. Those are people killing each other in their own community. He said, this is the problem. It's an epidemic. This is what needs to be addressed. What are your thoughts?
Well, here are some of the numbers I think are important. And you're right, around 7,000 blacks were killed last year, almost all of them by other blacks. Homicide is the #1 cause of death for young black men. Accidents, like car accidents, the #1 cause for preventable death for young white men. But homicide is the #1 cause of any kind of death for young black men. A young black man is around 7 or more times more likely than a young white man to be the victim of a homicide. Again, almost always at the hands of another young black man. In any given year, there are about maybe 500,000 non-homicide, violent black-white interracial crimes, Mark. 85% of the time, it is a black perp and a white victim, only 15% of the time the other way around. And over the last 45 years, according to the CDC, police killings of blacks have declined 79%, while police shootings of whites have flatlined. So if anything, white people might have an argument that they're being mistreated compared to black people. There have been several studies that have shown not only that the police are not using deadly force more against blacks than against whites, there are some studies that show the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect.